Welcome to Buckle Up Podcast Universe with Brandon Rush.
Recording. And welcome back to the Buckle Up Podcast Universe with Brandon Rush.
And Mama Rush.
And we are up to 10.9 million viewers and listeners in 28 countries and 242 cities around the world. Today we have special guest on here, Jim Clemente, who is a dear friend. Jim has done a lot. He has the podcast Best Case, Worst Case. He is he's a producer. He has his podcast. He's a technical advisor on Criminal Minds, which is where I first met him. Jim is a retired FBI agent as well, but still does all kinds of interviews on CNN and all kinds of shows about that. Jim is involved with a lot of different things, so we're excited to have Jim on here today. Jim also helped give me advice about this podcast. Truly, it's a blessing, and it's always been a man that has helped all kinds of people. Sorry, my mom knocked my light out of the way.
I'm sorry.
We'll fix that. So I'll just wait for Jim to come on. Okay. Yes. Jim, JC, my dear friend, how are you?
I'm good. How are you?
Doing well, Jim. You look great, brother.
Hey, Mama Rush. How you doing?
Jim, how are you?
I'm good. How are you?
So great to see you.
Absolutely, Jim.
You too as well.
Oh, great job.
Jim, I appreciate you coming on today. I know you had a busy day today.
I got till like 4 o'clock, and then I got to rush out.
Perfect, man. Well, whenever the time comes, Jim, just let us know. We're cool to get it off, shut it down. But Jim, it's all about you today.
Oh, really?
Yeah, man. It's completely on you. I want to thank you for all the advice you've always given me. I've known you since 2015 with Criminal Minds. What I know about you, Jim, is this, that you are a writer. You're a former retired FBI agent. You have your 2 podcasts. Will you mention the name of your podcast, please, for us?
Yeah. Real Crime Profile and Best Case, Worst Case.
Okay.
We have just broke over 1,000 episodes between the 2 of them.
Nice.
And 120 million downloads.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it's pretty good for the last 10 years. Yeah.
You've been going for 10 years with that?
Yeah.
Jim, will you mind telling us what kind of got you into, tell us kind of like the background of those 2 podcasts?
Sure. Well, I'll start with Real Crime Profile. That's the first one I did. And I don't know if you remember Lisa Zambetti. You should remember Lisa. Her because she, of course, casted you.
Yeah.
She brought you to us, and we said yes. If you can remember that far back.
I do.
After all the different shows you've been on since then. But Lisa came to me, and it was when Making a Murderer had just come out on Netflix.
Ooh.
And she started asking me questions about it, and I said, yeah, I get that you're interested in this, but I think that documentary only showed a slice of the truth.
Yeah.
And she said, oh, I have so many questions I would love to ask you about. And I said, well, it's funny because my friend Bob Ruff, I've been on his podcast a couple of times, and he said every time you come on my podcast, the numbers double.
Yeah.
So he goes, you should have your own podcast. And I said, yeah. So I was thinking about it. And then Lisa said, oh, I would love to interview you on a podcast. And I said, yeah, let's bring in Laura Richards at the time. She was a Scotland Yard analyst, in behavior. And so she had worked with us a little bit in the FBI, and I had been to the Scotland Yard for work and helped them gear up their behavioral analysis program. And so anyway, we brought in Laura, and we had Bob Ruff come on as our first guest, and we talked about Making a Murderer, and we said, look, we understand, what they put out is what they put out, but you should learn what this guy is really like. And this is his criminal history, and these are the kinds of things he did. And so we laid it out. And I think recently, last year sometime, another company published a answer to that documentary, and in which they actually quoted us. They played some segments from our podcast. 10 years later or 9 years later, they caught up to us,
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
So we're victim focused. We don't for the most part, we don't name the offenders
Yeah.
unless there's some reason that we should, or for example, that's a that's a documentary that's already been out and
Mhm.
his name is out there. But we make sure that we put the victims first. Our goal is to basically give the victims their voice back, and
Uh,
that's what we do. So then, best case, worst case, after maybe 8 or 10 months of real crime profile going on, Hernan Lopez, who was the head of Wondery, we were his first podcast on
okay.
Wondery. Now they're one of the biggest podcast companies on the planet.
Oh, wow.
Mhm.
We like to say we gave him a good start.
Yeah.
But anyway, he said, "Look, have you ever thought about doing another podcast?" And I was like, "Absolutely, I have." And the one I want to do is called Best Case, Worst Case. And he's like, "Well, what does that mean?" And I said, "I want to interview cops and related professionals about the best cases and the worst cases of their career,
Yeah.
so that we
Uh-huh.
could show the scope and the spectrum of different cases that law enforcement are engaged in." And he's like, "That sounds great." Well, where I got that from was when Mandy Patinkin came to interview me, and before he decided to do Criminal Minds,
Yeah.
he came to me, right? Well, he asked me to come meet him, and we sat down, and he said, "Tell me your best case and your worst case." And I
Mhm.
said, "Well, you know what? Um, my best case I'll tell you about, but my worst case is not for entertainment purposes. It's
Sure.
like it's horrific, and I really don't want to talk about it."
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
and that gave me the idea that, people don't understand what law enforcement officers carry around with them, and military men
Yeah.
and women, and people who are really immersed in the justice system. And I thought it was important to let people know that it isn't
Mhm.
just, the horrible ones that you hear about that do horrible things.
Yeah.
There are 500,000 law enforcement officers in this country, and the vast majority of them really are trying to do what's right. They're trying to keep people safe. They're trying to enforce the laws. They're trying to be good people and heroes, and they are heroes, men and
Yeah.
women.
Mhm.
And so that's where that podcast started. And Francie Hakes and I have been doing that for about 9 years now.
Okay.
Mhm.
Jim, both of these are absolutely amazing. Mom, I have a question before I hop in, but I do want to say this one thing, Jim, because I make sure to plug all your companies first. You also have XG Productions, which is like a technical advising company. Is that correct?
Well, it's not just technical; it's a full production services company. We've produced shows. We come up with the development. We develop shows and pitch them and sell them and produce them. So everything from, I mean, we did our most recent one was we did it's called let me see, Indivisible, Healing Hate. And it was about January 6th and how there's such a divide. And what we
Mhm.
do is we look for people on both sides of that divide, and we put them together in a room and had them talk through
Really?
what actually happened. Yeah. And I think it was a really positive thing. And we also I created the series Manhunt Unabomber, and that's a scripted series. So we did documentary series, we did scripted series, and we have 25 titles on Audible that are audio series, including Bluebeard, which is my first Audible. It's an audio play, so it's like a regular screenplay, but it's audio only, and it is about the first serial killer in LA, a guy
Mhm.
who literally married 30 women. In 1920, he was caught by one of his wives who hired a private investigator. Not only was he marrying women, but he murdered at least about 16 of his wives. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah. So,
That's That's wild, Jim. Jim, they get it? Sorry, didn't I get a huge award, Jim? Too? Didn't that? Didn't you get
well,
some kind of recognition? There's something that happened. It was on
well,
Thanksgiving.
yeah, we were number five in the country, the number five bestseller. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, so it was on the top of the charts for a long time, and it did really well. And when they listed the top sellers for the year, I mean, Audible put us in the top 20 of 2024,
Mhm.
but AP, the Associated Press, and had us ranked as number 5 for the year, and I think ABC had us ranked for number 8 for the year. So
Okay.
that was pretty damn good. And
Yeah.
Jessica Fines plays the lead, and Karen David, she was on Criminal Minds a couple times,
Yeah.
and then Adrian Pashtar, and Holt McElhaney. They were the leads in it, and they did such a great job. And that was the most fun production I've ever done.
Heck yeah. I'm happy, Jim. I just want to make sure we hit all those.
Yeah,
You go
well,
ahead, Mom.
well, let me give you one more.
Oh, yeah,
So
yeah.
we
Absolutely, Jim.
also, Kathy Canning now is my podcast partner on Real Crime Profile, and she was also a FBI profiler, and we did an Audible series called FBI Profilers. Uh, Let me see, Criminal Archives.
Okay.
That was the name of it. And what we did, we talked about 15 of our most memorable cases that we
Oh,
worked
wow.
together while we were in the BAU. And it's great because what we really did was sort of drill down and really tell people how these cases worked, what was really going on behind the scenes, and it was a lot of fun for us to do, and people, have also said that it's been very highly rated as well.
Oh,
Amen,
wow.
Jim. I love these.
Yeah. Well,
Mm.
well, Jim, I feel like you are a brother, a mentor, because as Mama Rush, I uncover the layer.
Oh yeah.
So I uncover the layer. And I want to tell you that the first day I met you at your other house, I felt this authentic person, a person who cares, you care about mankind. And I always
Of course.
thought that was a beautiful thing. And then you invited us to Thanksgiving at your home. And at your home, you fix it like a meal that a Southern person would fix. All the foods laid out, invited so many different people from every walk of life, from different countries. But you've always shown your heart to be real to me as a Southern mother. And you always shown your heart to be real with my son, Brandon. And you've tried to put him on any and every show that you either write or you're a part of. But the reason we do podcasts right now is because at that Thanksgiving table, you talked about the podcast you were doing, and I'd seen something, Brent had seen something, and you started to dive into the depths of what a podcast is about. And
Mm-hmm.
because you did that, Brandon started the podcast we now do. We did not know that we would be at how many viewers?
10.9, Jim. We're doing all right.
10.9
million
in the millions.
in the viewers and
That's
social
awesome.
media.
Yeah, now looking at the podcast, learning about, and we do about something different, everyday people.
Mm-hmm.
Everyday people, their lives, what impacts their lives, what made them choose a career and
Mm-hmm.
all. But it was because of you. And that's why I want all the viewers to know that you ever have a genuine person come into your life, as Jim, you've come into ours, and make us look at a different role of a career path or things that we can do to impact society. I want to say thank you today about
Absolutely, Jim.
that. So I'm uncovering some layers of you
Well,
that people need to know.
well, thank you. I mean, Bob Ruff sort of mentored me into doing this, and um, I had heard about podcasts before, but his was the first podcast I was ever on. Since then, I can't count the number of podcasts I've been on, and I can count the number of episodes I've produced. Actually, like I said, I think we're in the 10,000, excuse me, 1,004 or five that we've already dropped. So that's a lot. I mean, it's been great. It's been the topics that we've covered, the people that we've had on. I mean, I'm in the middle um, of talking to the guys who were part of surviving Ohio State, and I've already dropped one. We have another one coming next week, and then probably for the next, I don't know, 5 or 6 weeks, we'll have episodes where I interview those guys, and they're so brave to come forward and to fighting the good fight, and they're really coming through a lot of negative reactions from people on social media.
Mm-hmm.
They're saying they're not loyal to the school, and that's just all crap. And
Yeah.
so
Mm-hmm.
I'm giving them a forum to be able to talk about what actually
Yeah.
happened, and I think it's really important, really important.
Mm-hmm.
So Jim, one thing I wanted to say too, because I want to make sure I hit this, is I call you angel amongst us, you know that, and everybody I know loves you. I love you, but so many people love you too. And I kind of I had the honor and blessing to meet your dad, and I remember and I'm not trying to make you cry today, and I'm sorry if I do, but one of the things about your dad that I thought was truly special, which I feel like you got that from him too, is the fact that I believe that your dad was going to go pro with baseball, and he
Mm-hmm.
decided to go to World War II instead and
Yeah,
switch.
it was the Korean War.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, so that his brother didn't have to go overseas. Yeah,
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 that's just
yeah.
that's
That
truly a
was
testament.
that. I know, and a real sacrifice on his part, and I'm glad that he survived that war, but unfortunately, on the day he was traveling back, his father was killed,
Oh
and
man.
so he didn't get to see his father again. And then a month later, his other brother was killed, and
Yes.
it was a terrible, terrible time in his life. And after making such an amazing sacrifice, to have to go through that,
Yeah.
it was tough. But you met him. He was really affected by all that, but he still had a really great sense of humor.
Yeah, he did.
Great guy. He cared about people. He helped about people as much as he possibly could. And so, yeah, I feel like if anybody sees anything in me that I got from him, I'm really proud of that.
Absolutely. Well, you
Thanks.
definitely did, Jim.
Jim, so you're still Mother Rush uncovering things. Your heart is so decent. You have a decent heart.
Yeah.
You've never seen black, white, or any color.
My father didn't either. My mother didn't either. I mean,
Yeah.
that's how I grew up.
And so it had to be your parents showing you the way of looking at life and looking at people.
I could tell you specifically, like when my mother was, I think she was like 18 or 19, she worked at the Foundling Hospital in Manhattan, in Upper Manhattan, at the what's the name of that? It's like it was like a oh man, it's like a chapel and stuff
Mm-hmm.
up by the George Washington Bridge.
Oh
Uh-huh.
wow.
I can't remember the name of the actual property, but anyway, she worked at the Foundling Hospital, which was an orphanage
Mm-hmm.
for babies. And she said on the weekends, you know, the staff would be very minimal, and so
Mm-hmm.
they let the nurses take babies home with them,
Really?
Mm-hmm.
care for them for the weekend.
Mm-hmm.
And my mother said all the nurses were white, and so they took home all the white babies, and the black babies were left behind. So my mother took
Mm.
home the black babies,
Oh wow.
and
Wow.
she would get cursed at and spit on the subway.
Mm.
Because this is this was in the 1940s
Mm-hmm.
and 50s,
Mm-hmm.
and so it was a rough time,
Wow.
but she that she lived that, and my father the same thing. And I can remember him telling us stories about when he was playing baseball and his best friend,
Uh-huh.
his name was Don Newcomb, and he was the first black pitcher. I think it was it in the I can't remember if it's the American League or the National League. I can't remember what it was, but
Mm-hmm.
he also pitched two perfect games and stuff. He was the first black pitcher to do that as well. And he talked about, look, when they went around playing baseball, that Don couldn't stay in the hotels with the rest of the teammates. Like, like I couldn't understand that.
Yeah.
And
Mm-hmm.
that there's a movie that came out recently, The Green Book, I guess.
Yeah. I've seen that one.
About a
Yeah.
few years ago that basically focused on that
Mm-hmm.
exact issue. And it really it's an important thing to know. And we were raised, my whole family was raised to just not consider race or ethnicity or
Mm-hmm.
even religion,
Mm-hmm.
in terms of separating people.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
But I've always thought that people are infinitely interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And, and if you surround yourself with just people who look like you and act like you and
Mm-hmm.
think like you,
Mm-hmm.
you're gonna have a damn boring life. You're gonna have. And instead, I get to meet guys like Brandon Rush and Mama Rush. And,
Yes.
you know, it's a little less than boring. Let me put it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Jim, I'd say you're a blessing. You're an angel amongst us. I'm not sure if I
Well,
mentioned
I
this.
think you take that a little too far, but I did try to help you out because you're a great guy. It was very obvious, and you did great. And
Thank you.
and obviously, we knew there was talent there,
Yeah.
and you have been the best uh, promoter of your own talent, but also you've
Thank you, Jim.
proven us right.
Yeah.
Thank you, Jim.
Thank you, JC. I consider myself an alumni of Criminal Minds, and so everywhere I go, I'm representing all the people that have believed in me since day
Yeah,
one, back in Virginia, even.
got it.
Question. You got into law. You went to law school. Is that correct?
Mm-hmm.
And then you lived in Virginia a little bit. Is that correct?
Oh, quite a while. Yeah, I was.
Tell us a little bit about Virginia because we lived in Virginia. You went to University of what, Richmond?
Oh no, no,
No,
no. Jim
I
was
didn't
there.
go. I went to Fordham. It was after. It was while I was in the FBI that I transferred down there. But I also became an adjunct professor at UVA.
Oh
Oh,
wow.
I
okay.
was teaching at the FBI Academy. Yeah, while you teach at the FBI Academy, you you
Uh-huh.
you have to get adjunct faculty status at
Uh-huh.
UVA. Yeah, because it's a graduate program that we're teaching in, so we had to be accredited. And
Oh wow.
but I lived in Fredericksburg, Virginia, for quite a while,
Mm-hmm.
and I actually had a place down in Richmond as well.
Mm-hmm.
And I owned a bar down in Richmond called Potter's Pub. It was on Three Chops Road,
Yeah, we
Okay.
know exactly where that is.
I
right near
remember that
University of
place.
Richmond.
Uh-huh.
Yeah. And yeah, it was, I found this place in the middle of nowhere in Fredericksburg out by the Chancellorsville battlefield. And then they decided a couple years after I bought it to put in a reservoir all the way around it. So I ended up having something like 22 acres of land and over a mile of waterfront on that
Oh
reservoir.
wow.
Yeah, it was pretty amazing. It's a beautiful piece of property, but eventually it was a little bit too much for me to take care of from
Uh-huh.
here, from LA. So I ended up selling it.
Okay.
Okay.
Well, I had a story connected to that. Unless you,
Okay, go ahead.
Jim, I know you're part of two major things in history here. I won't hold on to them too long, but one during the time when you were in Virginia, that's when the DC sniper was going on, and you were involved with that case, I
Yeah.
believe.
Yeah, my brother and I were both. We, in fact, the shooting that happened at the Spotsylvania Mall, I'm pulling up to the crime scene, and I look to my left, and my brother's pulling up to the crime scene right next to me. We just happen to live about equidistant from it,
Yeah.
and we worked that case, and I found the shell casing there, and I also interviewed the sheriff, and unfortunately the sheriff, instead of talking to people that were there and putting out the leads that they gave him, he put out the white van. He just perpetuated the white truck thing when the only eyewitness for that event said, hey, it was a young black guy with an afro driving a dark sedan,
Wow.
and they peeled out this way, and the sheriff never put that in as a lead.
Oh my God.
So, but eventually, as we profiled the case, we determined, based on Jim Fitzgerald, who's the forensic linguistic profiler, he
Uh-huh.
determined that there was some Caribbean influence in the writing, and because they left a tarot card with writing on it, and then they put a note that my brother Tim found. Um,
Uh-huh.
and in it, he was saying that there was indication of, sort of a Caribbean influence.
Uh-huh.
And I came up with the thought that, look, because these shootings were incredibly well planned and executed, 6 shootings in a row, one shot, one kill, on the first day alone, and no decompensation at all, and that's unusual for a spree killer. And then that was a difference. That was something that we were like, yeah, there's something different about this. And
Uh-huh.
then, you know, we said that somebody like that must be in this like mid 40s, very, senior, and having had uh, military or police training and experience,
Yeah.
because shooting targets is way different than shooting people, yet he was unfazed by it.
Yeah.
Mm.
But Fitz says, but wait a minute, but these writings, I mean, first of all, the letter that that left was on pink lined paper with little stars that you get when you're in kindergarten on your
Yeah.
for a good report. Like, what
Mhm.
the hell is this? And it was in a Halloween baggie. Like, no self-respecting adult is going to communicate with law enforcement this way.
Yeah.
Mhm.
He said, look, if he's an adult, he's maybe 18, but I think he's even younger than that. He's probably 15, 16 years old.
Mhm.
And based on the language used. And it even said, this is for you, Mr. Police. Like, he's looking up to the police.
Yeah.
Anyway, the point is, we said, I said, look, so either we have a guy who's absolutely, totally calm, cool, collected, very professional when he's executing his plan, planning and executing the plan, and he decompensates when he's communicating with us, or for the first time in history, we have a sniper team. And they're like, no, they don't play well together. They have a God complex, all that stuff. And I said, well, it could happen if one of them's older, like in his mid 40s, and one of
Yeah.
them's 15, and this one's controlling the hell out of that one. No, it wouldn't
Wow.
work. And I said it would work if the older one is sexually assaulting,
Ooh.
abusing the younger one. He could have complete control over him. And it turns out that Malvo came out about 11 years later saying that's
Mhm.
exactly what happened. So,
Mm.
profiling works. I mean, based on their behavior, we were able to figure that out. And it, I think it helped solve the case.
Mm.
And sorry, my one last thing.
Yeah, you got to say
Yeah,
this.
sorry.
And then I got to tell
Jim, you have the book called you have a thing on this called Call Me God, right?
Yeah, that's on Audible. It's Call Me God. That's it's the second Audible original that we created, and that was also a bestseller. And yeah, you can listen to them on Audible anytime. If you don't have an Audible subscription, you can get one for free, and cancel it anytime.
Okay, had to make sure I threw that out there, Jim.
Jim, what's so interesting about that story with Malvo is that my children were going to Tucker High School in Richmond, Virginia, where Malvo ended up was a block away at the
Gas station.
7-Eleven gas station around the
On
corner.
Parham Road. There was right there at the stop where the FBI had stormed. Someone else called from the same phone that he called from right there on Parham Road.
Right.
And they
me and Dad drove by there, I remember.
they had just closed the schools in Richmond, but so close. He was so close to the school where my kids attended, and that was so scary about this whole situation. How they were traveling through. To this day, I will not to say anything about rest stops, but I won't stop at a rest stop. I because of that, it had such an impact on me.
Yeah, people don't understand. Like, when you were in that whole area, and unfortunately, Prem, one of the victims, stopped in Massaponax,
Mm-hmm.
called his wife and said, "Yeah, I stopped to get gas down here so that I wouldn't have to drive through DC where that sniper is." And then he got shot in the head.
That's right,
Jeez.
because they were closer than we knew. And I'm so glad they stopped everything with the schools. Go ahead. You had something else to say?
Yeah, my
Yeah.
brother's wife was at that same gas pump just minutes before that.
Holy
Wow.
smokes.
She has the receipt from it. But she had a 15 passenger van, which was taller than her. So
Yeah.
no shot. But
Wow.
she was right there. And, and my brother was, when he got to the crime scene, he called up his wife and said, don't come out to Massaponax. They're down here now. And she said, I just left the gas station.
God was on her side,
One thing I wanted to ask you when it comes to FBI and that type of thing, how did you decide in your life that that is the career path you want to take, though you were a lawyer? You wanted to take that career path. Do you have this kind of spiritual type of thing that you can read into even criminals that someone's telling the truth, someone's not? but I
Well,
think this was the way I wanted to. Yeah, this is the way you wanted to go, because I think that's most interesting.
yeah.
And Jim, it's up to you what you want to share, man. You know, you don't.
You don't have to share everything.
No, it's okay. Um, so when I was a prosecutor, I found out that the guy who molested me molested a whole bunch of other people. I went to the FBI. They did an investigation. They wired me up at one point. I got them locked up. And after the
Mm-hmm.
case, they handed me an application to the FBI.
Mm-hmm.
Totally unexpected, but
Mm-hmm.
I think I had always wanted to be an investigator. I wanted to be a
Oh,
detective.
I didn't know that.
And the agent said, FBI agents are just federal detectives. And I
Mm-hmm.
was like, okay, I could do that.
Mm-hmm.
And then, you talk about telling whether or not people are telling the truth or not. I mean, certainly I learned a tremendous amount in my career, in my 22 years in the FBI,
Mm-hmm.
about how deception detection and how people um, will typically change behavior when they're not telling the truth. And
Mm-hmm.
the thing is, I also learned how to become passive in taking in all sorts of sensory data so that my gut will be well informed. In other words,
Mm-hmm.
um, I don't like try to focus on one thing. I try to
Mm-hmm.
take in everything about how a person communicates and look for changes in that behavior and then drill down into the areas that cause those changes, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it's very effective in terms of being able to get people, well, to catch people when they're lying and also get people to actually reveal the truth. So,
Mm-hmm.
but in doing so, I'm not harsh. I build rapport with people. I don't, um, I don't feel that being, uh, trying to frighten somebody is the right way to get accurate and reliable information. And
Mm-hmm.
I think the right way is to actually build rapport and make sure
Mm.
that they have, you give them dignity and respect, and many times that will actually make it a lot more uh, plausible for them to actually tell the truth.
I understand.
Absolutely.
And the final question I have is bad case, good case, worst case.
Best case, worst
Yeah,
case.
best case, worst case. What is the most interesting case
Ooh.
that you think you've ever done in your career?
Wow, interesting. Well, let me tell you, probably I investigated the president of the United States, the
I
first
didn't know.
lady, a couple of national security advisors, the director of Central Intelligence. I've done, investigations against really, really fascinating people in fascinating positions. But I think probably the most interesting case was one that came to me when I was on a white collar squad, and it was just a real estate investment fraud. It was $25,000. When I started doing the interviews, I realized there's probably a hell of a lot more going on here than meets the eye. And I
Mm-hmm.
started really digging down, and I was able to, if you ever saw the um, the movie, I think it's Tom Cruise, The Firm.
Yeah, I love that movie.
Yeah.
Love
I found the youngest guy in this company and convinced him to wear a wire for me. And he calls me up on that anniversary every year to thank me, because otherwise he would have been involved in all sorts of really bad
Oh,
crime.
it.
It actually protected him because he was wearing a wire for me.
Mm-hmm.
He wore that wire for 6 months, and he did such an amazing, he turned out to be such a fascinating, wonderful person, and just brilliant, that what it ended up happening is, as we kept on going in this investigation, we kept subpoenaing records from the banks that they were defrauding, and and they started shutting down lines of credit. So the CEO had to start firing people because he started losing money, right?
Mhm.
So he fires pretty much everybody in the firm except for the guy that's wearing the wire. So now he's telling him to do all these things, and the guy's got a wire on, and so
Mhm.
everything was just laid out there. So after an 18-month investigation, we had a 3.5 month long trial. I was on the stand for about 2 weeks,
Holy smoke.
and this guy was on the stand for about a week, and we charged him with $480 million worth of fraud. So it went from
Holy.
25,000 to 480 million. I went to Israel
Mm.
to get documents. It was a crazy, complicated, very, very interesting case.
Mm.
And that one, I basically drove the whole thing. And
Mm.
I got a reputation for being tenacious and a bulldog. And those prosecutors that worked with me, I had 5 assistant United States attorneys prosecuting the
Wow.
case. That's how big it was. And I
Yeah.
was the only FBI agent. So it was a little crazy, but
Yeah.
Mm. Wow.
but that's why um, the following year, I get called up to the assistant director's office at the New York office of the FBI, and I get told the FBI director just called and said, "You're transferred to Little Rock on
Mm.
Monday." And this was Friday.
Yeah.
What did
Why
I
would you?
do?
Yeah, exactly. That seems like a.
I didn't know, but it was for the Whitewater investigation. And
Oh, the white water.
so it was all
Wow.
secret at that point. So, you know, that's why, because the AUSAs who got brought out there by Bob Fisk, who used to be the U.S. Attorney in the Southern District, same Southern District that's prosecuting Diddy right now,
Yeah.
um,
Mm.
they basically said to the director, the FBI director, we need a bulldog down
Mm.
here, and that's how I ended up on it. But
Wow.
it was a long, very, very, very difficult 2 year process. But what
Mm.
was funny was when we had about 50 agents out doing the takedown. We
Yeah.
arrested
Mhm.
a whole bunch of people all at once and seized a million pages of documents and
Mm.
30, I think, uh, I think something like 11,000 hours of tapes.
Mm.
Wow.
Um, and I had to go through all that stuff. Luckily, the cooperating witness that I had wired up, he was brilliant and he knew it where everything was, and it was just great. But when after the opening statements at trial, my boss pulled me aside and she said, "Oh my God, you kept telling me that you needed more help, you needed more people, and I just kept telling you, you're doing fine. Go ahead."
Yeah.
And she goes, "Now I realize, oh my God, how big that was.
Mm.
She was like blown away. But it was a
Mm.
crazy case, and a lot, there's so much more. I talk about it on Best Case, Worst Case,
Okay.
or
Perfect.
early episodes. So if you want to hear more about it, it's on.
Okay. Great.
Yeah. I do have, and I make sure this is my final
Yes, ma'am.
question.
I'll let you.
My final question. Jim, in your life, and this has happened in my life, has anyone ever brought a story or you tried to tell someone a story that had really happened to you and no one believed that story? They felt you were making something up. They felt that, nah, this can't be real. This couldn't be happening to that person. If that has ever happened to you, how have you handled it? Because it's happened to me. So
Mhm.
what would you give? What advice would you give someone as kids out there
Oh,
telling
yeah.
their truth, me telling my truth? What would you do?
Yeah, well, I don't think it's happened to me personally, but just as recently as an hour ago, I was talking to people who had exactly that happen to them.
Mhm.
And unfortunately, there are, well, a number of people I know actually that reported that somebody in a position of authority um, did something bad to them, sexually assaulted them, committed an assault, stole something, whatever it is.
Mhm.
But the fact is that there's this thing called the halo effect. and people in a position of authority, and people who are sort of at the tops of their field, and people who are popular, and people who are charismatic, have this halo effect, and people around them, especially, are vulnerable to this, and they think, well, you know, you can't actually be this good person who has this halo around them and do those bad things. And I know that you're this good person because I know you. So
Yeah.
you must not have done these bad things. So anybody who says you did a bad thing, they're lying. They're trying to get money. They're trying to disparage this person. They're jealous, whatever it is. That's
Mm-hmm.
the kind of thing. And that happens. And you know, it's hard to pierce that halo effect, especially when you're close to those people. But if you're going to someone, this is what my advice would be. If you go to somebody in a position of authority who, let's say, law enforcement or administration, or, you know, the school counselor or the teachers or the
Mm-hmm.
principal, whatever it is, or the coach,
Mm-hmm.
and if you're going to a person like that and they tell you, well, you're lying, that's not true, didn't happen, you're making it up, you know that that's not the case.
Mm-hmm.
You need to find someone else. You need to go to someone else. And and if it takes you forever,
Mm-hmm.
you should keep telling your story. I kind of hate it when people say, tell your truth, because it is the truth.
Mm-hmm.
It's not your truth. It's not a perspective that, you know,
Mm-hmm.
can be misinterpreted, or maybe you're telling something that isn't actually right.
Mm-hmm.
When you're telling the truth, the things
Mm-hmm.
that actually happened,
Mm-hmm.
should be no one who can tell you it didn't happen.
Mm-hmm.
Unless they were there and they experienced something different, they shouldn't be able to tell you. And
Mm-hmm.
anybody in a position of authority who tells somebody else that didn't happen,
Mm-hmm.
that person is not doing their job. That
I
person is
understand.
undermining the truth. That person is abdicating their responsibility. That person is not doing what they should be doing in a position of authority. And
Okay.
so my advice would be, find somebody else, keep talking, yell it louder and louder and louder until somebody actually
I
takes it
understand.
seriously.
Yeah, that
Amen.
makes sense.
Well, Jim, look, I know you got to go, so I just want to say this, brother. I feel like you know, one of my favorite movies is My Cousin Vinny, and I think you even know the writer. But it's like whenever
Yes, I
Joe
do.
Pesci, you're not Marissa Tomei, but you kind of been like where you just the fence is wrong and you hit like you've done a phenomenal job here today, Jim. I could literally talk to you for hours because literally from the first moment I met you, and I love you, Jim. You took me right
Oh,
in.
me too.
I'm
And
like,
Mama Rose.
yeah,
Okay.
at lunch. I mentioned that when I did.
Okay. Yeah, I want to make sure I can
Paul,
find
yeah,
it.
I did say that. Sorry, Jim, that you told me to come sit down with you and Emily for lunch, and I was like, man, you have all these interesting stories, and then you pulled out your book without consent. But we were gonna just mention everything. The fact that you had the Call Me God is one of them. Best case, worst case scenario, and then sorry, Jim, Real Crime Profile are all your podcasts where people can listen to.
Yeah, Real Crime Profile.
And
But
I,
like if you go to Audible and just search my name, or XG Productions with an
Okay.
S at the end, XG, like former G men and women.
uh-huh.
If you just search that, you'll find we have 25 titles up there.
Oh
So,
wow.
Wow.
you know, there's plenty of, I mean, After the Fall is about, it's called After the Fall, the FBI's 9/11 investigation.
Oh.
Probably one of the most important works we've done. It's
Okay.
really far-reaching and incredibly detailed about what happened, you know, building up to 9/11 and the FBI's investigation of it. And then uh, probably my two favorite ones are probably Where the Devil Belongs, which is about the Unabomber investigation,
Okay.
and also the, the Golden City murder case, is called Evil Has a Name.
Okay.
And
Hmm.
those those are, we interviewed four, they call themselves the Survivor Sisters, four women who survived that killer, and wanted to tell their stories. So, you know, we have another one called Invisible, about the Wind River Reservation and all the young women who've been killed or are
Oh
missing,
really?
and they're not doing any investigations about it. It's
Mm-hmm.
terrible. And then, you know, we have some that are sort of lighter, and they're about sports and crime, or one, am I dating a serial killer? About it's sort of a lighthearted look at dating, and some of the women that
Important.
came forward talked about some pretty serious stuff, so we took it very seriously as well. But anyway, it's great seeing you both. I
You're
love
great too. I love
both,
you, Jim. You
and
know that.
can't
Then
wait
we
to see
could
you again
talk
in
forever, but
person.
thank you.
Yeah, thank you
This
so
has
much
been-
for coming on here
and
today, Jim.
Of course.
You're so busy.
Yeah.
All
And
right.
Jim, you're always welcome back on. But
All
one
right.
thing we
Well,
always
send me the link, and then I'll post it on my social media.
Oh, absolutely. I'll have it all up. Absolutely will, Jim. But we always do one thing. We always give everybody a round of applause. You've been wonderful, Jim.
And
You
thank
know.
you for the success we've now had.
Yeah,
with this
because of you,
podcast,
Jim.
because
Yeah,
of you,
and all the
Jim.
advice you've always given me,
All
man.
right.
I
So
appreciate
Oh,
let's
I
get
just got
ready
you
to do
started.
our
it.
job,
Thank
Jim.
you.
Love you.
Man, we love you,
Love you
Jim.
too. Take
Take
care.
care, brother.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Oh, he was
Always.
outstanding.